Thank you, everybody, for joining us for day 2, session 2 of the 2021 Building Solutions High Performance Campus Retreat. We're very glad everybody's here, excited to see all your lovely and shining faces. And just as a reminder, keep yourself muted throughout the presentation unless you have a question and you're willing to pipe up or the presenter requests your input. You're welcome to pipe in with a question, or you can enter it in the chat. Also, as a reminder, all these presentations will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. Our next presenter is David Charney of Stealth Monitoring. He is the Chief Customer Officer and presents a consistent voice of the client's needs in the business. David leads organizational strategies through features, service levels, response times, and overall communication. He helped found the company with his brother and father and has continued to help grow the company as a market leader in North America. David took MBA classes at Harvard at 17, received his BS finance degree from Indiana University, and has a master's from SMU in business intelligence. Welcome, David, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, William. Thanks for inviting me today. Thanks for the group's participation today. I hope to make it as collaborative as possible. It's always an interesting time during COVID trying to get engagement, but I do have a couple questions designed to sort of pique your interest. If any of you have any specific questions about security, video strategy, any of those kinds of topics, I welcome you to either share and ask them openly or throw them in the chat, and I'll be happy to field them. What I've done today is I've prepared just a couple slides to kind of get you going. And as well, I'll spend 2-3 minutes on my background, just complementing what William said. Stealth Monitoring watches 50,000 cameras today. We help prevent and deter crime in real time. And our goal of this session is really just to educate you and have me as a resource for anything you guys want to talk about. But our kind of slogan or tagline has always been, why put in cameras if nobody's watching them? And so all too knowledgeable for most of you is having cameras and after the fact seeing something that goes bad. Our strategy has always been to watch proactively. But I'm not here really for that today as much as just being a resource for you guys. The team has asked me to kind of educate and share some knowledge, talk about what's going on in the industry, and I'm about to share that on my screen. So here I go. Let me share my screen. And hopefully you guys are able to see my screen sharing. I'm going to try to go full screen with the PowerPoint here. Let's see if I can do this. Okay.
There it is. You see it.
Great. Glad you're able to confirm. So once again, David Charney, thanks for spending the time with me here today. I'm going to try to, as best I can, make this interactive. So please feel free to sort of get off the couch and jump out at me. I much prefer a collaborative experience. In terms of items I thought I'd cover, maybe collaboration styles and campus security strategies, maybe cover some fundamentals. My expertise around security is most focused around the video security, but I can cover other topics as you wish. In terms of just gaining some experience, I want to make sure I share some best practices so you guys get some tips and tricks just from doing what we do and what you can do at your campuses or facilities. I think a bigger trend in modern era, fortunately or unfortunately, is kind of an emergency response program. So I think I wouldn't mind spending a couple minutes on that. And then I'll make sure to have plenty of time to open up for any sort of questions you guys have. But please feel free at any time to jump in with a question. In terms of just kind of getting things started, I don't know that I can see all of you on video, but I wouldn't mind either in the chat box or if you have your camera on, it'd be nice to see you sort of clapping or snapping. I would be curious to know a couple questions from you. Does your site have cameras today? And let me just see if there's a way I can go not full screen so I can see your faces or some of the reactions here. I'd be curious to know. I have lots of screens here, but I need to make sure I have you guys on the right screen. Bear with me one sec. Okay, I see a number of you there. Just a couple of you. A lot of you are on audio only, so I'll challenge you, for those that are on audio only, to make sure that you get the most out of this session. If there's anything you can do to turn on your cameras, that would make this much more entertaining for me. But really, to just ask you to contribute as best you can. So I do see a few of you on camera, maybe just with claps or snaps. Maybe claps are good news and snaps are not, just to make this a little interactive. How many of you have cameras today at your campuses or facilities? Thumbs up, I see. High five. Okay, so yeah, looks like just about every makes sense. And how many of you have a inventory or a record of, how many cameras you have, where they're located on a map, maybe even some network diagrams? All right. The gentleman in the blue at the top of my screen, thank you. Thank you, Tom, as well. Adam, sounds like you guys are organized. You guys are so far getting an A in the class. Obviously, documentation is important. Legal cases, and I'll talk a lot about legal liability today, even though I'm not a lawyer. A lot of my clients, hundreds of my customers, feel that having the documentation to support your network and your things is a very important step, especially on campuses where you've got different age folks and you've got slip and falls and you've got kind of those kinds of issues that cause a potential legal risk. I would say, from my experience doing this more than a decade, number one is, do you have a security plan? Number two is, do you document it so you know what you have? And number three is, are you maintaining it regularly? The worst thing you could do in terms of exposing your organization to risk is have a camera on your property that isn't working. Okay, so the false impression that you're providing security and yet you're not maintaining it. So it's a very important mindset to make sure, even if you decide you're not going to use a camera, or the company doesn't want to, or the organization doesn't want to spend the money right now, take the physical camera down, put it in a box, and make sure to plan to put it back up when you're ready to correct it. But if somebody feels secured because that camera's there and you're not providing security, it can open you up to a little bit more like a negligence liability type situation. We just don't want that. And so it's just a word of advice, I guess. All right, question number two. Does anybody know, do you have signage around your property? Whether it says, you can just, once again, kind of a yes/no answer, but do you have signage at your property about security? I see a no, I see a thumbs down. No, a hand up for signage, okay. I see about half and half, okay. So from the video response, I can say we got a 50-50 there from those that are on video. I'll just give a couple comments here, and I'm not asking anybody's specific situation, but I'll just share kind of the realm of possibility on signage. There, you can show up at a grocery store, and you can see things like cameras are being recorded here. Big box retailers that you've all probably been to. You can see we secure the site with cameras. Any signage that gives a sense of security can actually expose you. So it's important that you be careful with that signage philosophy, and I'll give you some best practices here in a second. Obviously, you are investing in your community by adding security, and that's obvious by the cameras that are hanging there. And a bright colored or a high contrast sign, kind of the red and whites or the black and white kind of signs, are good for awareness and to try to help hopefully make sure that a criminal goes maybe a different direction than your property. So that's a good strategy. The risk is that you give somebody a false sense of security, that they're protected because you've put in cameras. So the word choice that we've used for 15 years and is on signs in 45 states and most of the Canadian provinces, but implemented all over the North America, have the very important three key words: do not rely. Okay, it almost doesn't matter what you put after that, but basically what we're saying is, do not rely on this system for your protection. It is obviously a sign that tells everybody we have cameras and we're doing more to improve security, but it eliminates the problem where somebody says, I sue you, I got attacked on the way back to my car, I thought I was secure here, and they pull you into an unfortunate situation. And obviously the core situation is the most unfortunate, but secondarily could be the exposure you create yourself. So I just thought that signage tidbit might be something to think about. some people might go, oh, quickly, I gotta just double check my signage with my team and obviously go get legal advice. I'm not your lawyer, but just something to consider. I have seen people very upset by putting in good energy and effort and then getting kind of penalized by a false sense of security creation. So just as somebody who's done hundreds of projects with many different customers of all sizes, public companies, private security, we generally will tell them you can use our signage or you can put up your own, but we don't want our company name on there because we don't want to get pulled into it if it's not got sort of approved language on it. Okay, so question number 3, just to engage you guys a little bit more interesting for those that are on video or engaging on the chat. How many of you know if your video data is stored locally at your site, which is, let's call it on premise, versus it's stored somewhere else, namely the cloud or somewhere else? I saw a thumbs up so I'm assuming that means your data is stored locally, okay, which is, in my opinion, great. Adam as well, okay. I don't know if Tom and Mark's team, if you guys want to give me, not sure on that one, okay, no problem. Not sure on that one either, okay. I'll just there's not necessarily a winning answer there as much as there was some advice on signage that was a little bit more pointed there a minute ago. On the storage, I just want to kind of explain the spectrum, if you will. That way everybody understands. On-premise is the highest quality recording you can get. So when you store those camera qualities, you can get the higher frame rates, the higher resolutions. You can store it on that server in your closet. As you get to talking about cloud offline backups or even cloud being your primary storage, keep in mind there are a lot of little nerdy conversations to discuss here, but essentially if you are only storing in the cloud, there is of course a risk that if your internet connection goes down, you might not be recording. There's also a discussion of the compression quality. So you think about the number of frame rates you have per second, the resolution, which you guys would all know from your cameras and your phones. The resolution and frame rates are and even color are the variables you can play with to pass more video through over the internet. So when you start compressing that video, which is good for backup purposes over the cloud, it's not necessarily great for investigation purposes when you're trying to pull historical footage. Now the algorithms are getting better and the cloud's getting better, but I'll give you some basic math just so you can think about the statistics of getting rich content out of your premise. A single 2 megapixel camera, which is about the industry standard 5 to 8 years ago, can produce 10 megabits per second. And if you're not a technical person, just take the 10 and that'll be a sufficient number for this conversation. If you're more technical, then you will have more appreciation for what I'm saying. Okay, that's a single 2 megapixel camera. And let's just say an average site has 30 to 40 cameras. Obviously, the folks on this call could range very, very greatly in the number of cameras. But let's just say you have 30 cameras just to make the math easy. 30 cameras at 10 megabits per second, if they all had motion in them at the same time, would produce a lot more video content than you can get out on an internet pipe. Unless somebody has some very, very high-powered fiber and pays a very, very expensive bill, you're not going to be able to get it out in its sort of raw, rich content format. So just be careful and wary. Cloud is powerful. It's nice to get a backup if my NVR is broken, if I had water damage in my closet. There are some strategies that are really helpful, but just keep in mind that. The other thing I'm seeing is, of course, a cloud strategy, and then they put a memory card into the camera. And so they sort of say, well, I have 30 days maybe on a memory card in the camera, and then it's sort of offline stored in the cloud. So I just wanted to kind of share that realm of possibility without getting too technical. The point I was trying to make is that the upload speed of your internet, not the download speed of the internet, is what would matter to get your video out. So somebody might be paying at your location, maybe it's 50 download speeds and 5 up or 110, those kinds of numbers. And if you just do the basic math on what I just said, you have 30 cameras producing 10 megabits per second when there's motion. You can't even get a fraction or, a big portion of that video out. I hear somebody join. Okay, just somebody's joining. I think didn't mean to have the mic on. Okay, so that's just a little premise around cloud storage versus on-site storage, just to give you guys a little bit of context to think about. I think that very quickly creates an opinion. I'm not giving you what mine is, but it gives you an opinion pretty quickly about what strategy you might want to consider for your own assets. Question number 4, just to engage you guys further. How many of you know how many of your cameras are working? So the fake example would be, I have 16 cameras, but today 15 or 12 of those are working, or all 16 are working. Adam and another gentleman at the top, sounds like you guys know. Sounds like Tom raised his hand, he's knows as well, and Mark as well. Great. So like I said earlier, the risk you have is maybe you have a flat screen and you walk by it every day and you kind of see, or you have a guard station at the front, and so somebody's kind of keeping an eye on it. That's a very acceptable way of making sure your cameras are working. As I mentioned earlier, one of your biggest risks would be you have a camera and it's not working. So for those of you that have a guard's desk or a screen on the MVR, and you are able to sort of walk by it, whether it's you or your team or somebody in your organization is walking by it almost on a daily basis, that's a very normal and very healthy status. For those of you that don't have a flat screen on it or don't display it, it could very well be, or don't have anybody that's at any hour of the week staffed to look at it, it could be a risk. So just make sure you think about that as almost like a checklist item to take home is, oh, wow, it could be such that camera 7 has been down for 6 months and I never do it. So once again, this is partially a technology advice, but it's also partially kind of risk reduction. So I thought I would share that. So awesome. Well, thanks for the participation on that. We haven't really talked about types of technologies. So just want to confirm, you guys are in fact able to see this PowerPoint now, or is it too small? I want to make sure. Somebody could just give me a head nod. That'd be great. You're able to see it. Great. So I just wanted to sprinkle and talk about the generations of camera technology, because that's something that's valuable to folks. We're all familiar with that old grainy camera, the analog camera. It used to be installed with a sort of a BNC cable, analog cables, kind of like almost like your cable TV. And that kind of technology is obviously outdated. Modern era, people are putting in IP cameras that have a Cat5 cable. So just to talk non-nerdy, for those that know a laptop cable that plugs into the internet, that is the modern era type of camera. It is both the data and the power for that same camera is on that same wire. It's called power over Ethernet. That is, for the last 5-10 years, been kind of the industry standard. Hopefully what you guys are putting in is using that. In terms of the old analog stuff, we do see a number of folks. Hi, Eric, do you have a question? Okay, great. Thanks for muting.
Yeah, I got muted, David. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So in terms of the wiring, I think just one thing to note is, because the old wires were put in as a point in time as the best technology back in the day, some of you are dealing with something that I deal with every single day, which is a facility that was sort of wired at a point in time, and you're living with what you got. It's a very common thing we see in the space. So, hey, I've had these cameras or I've had these wires back in the day, but we've since wanted to upgrade the cameras. Hey, we want the new stuff, or we got budget this year, that kind of thing. In the old days, the best you had was an analog camera. In modern era, you want IP, but you may or may not have the budget to put in a Cat5 cable and kind of replace the wire and the camera. There is really 3 technologies. There's the old analog, there's Cat5 and IP, which is what you'd put in if you had a brand new building today. And there are some folks that we'll see out there that are running an intermediate, or what I'll call a hybrid technology, which is called HD over Coax. The reason HD over Coax came out in about 2013 was, I don't have a lot of money and I want more clarity, and I don't want to go have to rewire the building. That's kind of my shorthand version of why that sort of protocol came out. And what was neat about it was you could get more clarity on the existing cabling. Okay, so you didn't have to spend as much money on labor. You didn't have to go, maybe there's parts of your facilities that are really tricky. Maybe they wired it in during construction. It's kind of not accessible anymore. Maybe it's behind a wall, all those kinds of things. So you do see those 3 different technology stacks out there. If you have choice, you want Cat5 cables with IP cameras. Those are upgradable. You can make that a network backbone. You could end up adding another switch at the other end of it. there's a lot of advantages. But the real advantage of an IP camera, besides for just pure clarity, is the maintenance cost. An IP camera is smart. It's got a web server built in. You can restart it. You can reboot it. You can do all kinds of things with it. And that can save you money than just always doing what we call a truck roll, always having to have a technician kind of mess with it. So things can be remotely repaired, and that saves you money in kind of your total cost of ownership. So hopefully the transition from analog back in the day, we all seen before, grainy, old coax cabling. Today, if you're putting in something new, I highly suggest it be a Cat 5 with an IP camera, and some of you might have some intermediate technology in there. If that's something anybody needs to learn more about, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm doing this as a primer so that everybody on this call, which has various levels of knowledge, can kind of look at their own campus and kind of get a better sense after this call what they're dealing with at their own property, if that helps. Okay. Without any further questions, I'll dive into the kind of the camera types, the models, just the shapes to orient you a little bit more. This is really about education. In the old days, you saw a lot of what I would call box cameras, which is a camera that looks like this. I'm hoping you're able to see my mouse, kind of the dead bottom center of this screen. So that's kind of like what you'd see outside of a Target or a Walmart, mounted very high on industrial buildings. This is kind of the bread and butter from back in the day. Domes have been around forever. And so those are the core of what you saw historically. Maybe an older dome kind of looked like this. We called it a baseball camera. In modern era, sometimes you can tell and it's obvious. Sometimes it's not so easy to tell. But in modern era, and by the way, this camera on the bottom left is a pan tilt zoom camera, a PTZ camera. They've been making PTZs a long time, 50 years analog, but the modern era ones, they're IP, and they're really powerful. These are cameras that can be driven remotely. If you have somebody manning your camera station, if you have a large outdoor space where you really can't afford to put as many cameras as you'd like, or you can't reach there, or you want to get back deep into a lot from the building that don't want to have to put infrastructure power poles out there, the PTZs can be very powerful. We find our particular company finds these very powerful in real time when we see an incident going on in real time on somebody's camera and we want to go grab a license plate, go grab somebody's face, go take a look at what they're doing and zoom in. These kinds of cameras can easily 1,000 feet away. You can see a person's face. You can get a license plate. Very, very powerful for large parking areas, parking lots. Think of I don't mean to stereotype, but we've all been a high school kid before, but sort of like the high school kid doing donuts. This is a great camera to kind of zoom in the middle of the night and see who was doing it. That's kind of something to keep in mind. In terms of bread and butter, this camera right here is #1 seller. Dome is probably right there with it. So these are the top 2 sellers just for sheer body styles, the shapes. So the domes, you'll see an indoor version, which is usually a little bit smaller, a little less obvious, a little more low profile. It's not so in your face. Sometimes you kind of see them in ceiling tiles, kind of like you would maybe in a car dealership lobby or an office building in a corner where you walk in, versus kind of an outdoor camera. This is what's called a bullet camera. My personal preference and tendencies are that cameras that have a flat face will have a clearer picture, will have less distortion, will see a little bit better in the dark. Okay, so cameras that have a flat front tend to see better and a little bit less problematic, a little bit better clarity, a little bit sharper. Okay, so if you're walking with your vendor, trying to decide, look at what you have and trying to understand things, every camera can come at different megapixels, different clarity, different night vision. Light rating, just so everybody knows, in cameras is called lux rating. It's a rating of how well it sees in dark. They kind of correlate it with kind of almost like a ratio to the moon, so sort of seeing it real well. Point I'm trying to make is on the outside of your property, if you're trying to watch for kids on skateboards, graffiti of your building, those kinds of things, this camera is kind of your bread and butter. This is what you'd want to put all the way around, kind of think of the 4 corners concept. I obviously have no clue what any of your property types are, but this shape of a camera is the most obvious. I want to just make a comment that I mentioned kind of the inside version of the dome. On the outside, especially in urban areas, we use a lot of what are called Vandal Domes. It is also a dome, but it is designed to not be tampered with by a bad person or person with bad intentions. So That means it's got tamper-resistant screws. That means that the plexiglass or the glass housing can't kind of be crushed with a basic baseball bat. If you spray paint it, it'll kind of drip right off. So there are cameras here that, for a little bit more money, we're not talking material. They're going to last you a lot longer, and they're much more an industrial grade versus kind of an inside indoor rated. I don't want you guys to think that an inside and outside is necessarily universal, even though they're all could be a dome. Anytime somebody can reach a physical camera outside of your building, it should either be above 10, 12, 14 feet in a camera like this, or it needs to be a Vandal Dome with resistance to protection, and the wire needs to be protected if it's reachable. So when I do a C-class apartment complex that's infested with gangs and drugs and unwanted activity, I'm doing cameras only of this type if they're anything below 14 feet, and I'm doing cameras mostly really up high so they can't be tampered with. The only other camera I'll mention, just because you kind of see it come and go, but right now it's kind of hot, is what's called a turret camera. If you kind of look at this turret, it's kind of a redo of a camera of the past, not that revolutionary, but we're seeing a lot of it right now. I mentioned earlier to you, just kind of my own advice, that a flatter faced camera tends to have a better picture quality. And people love the kind of the dome body style, but notice how this camera is a flat version of a dome, kind of serving the same purpose. So I'm seeing a lot more of this now than I am this, even though you see these absolutely everywhere. So just wanted to share that with you. We sell, thousands of cameras all the time. So I just wanted you guys to have a little feel for that. So great. In terms of strategies for your campus, I purposely did not show you the actual sort of details on this spec here because it is client information, even though I've hidden the customer's name. But I wanted to talk about the strategy. The other big thing to worry about or to think about or to plan for is what is your standards, what is your consistent strategy? In both proactively trying to build up a defense and secure your property and protect it, as well as a reactive legal risk concern. As you can see, I work with a lot of large companies and I keep bringing up legal, but it's a big factor. The strategy needs to be consistent. For those of you that have multiple buildings, campuses with multiple buildings, or even multiple site locations, this section is much more important for you than for others if you're on a single site location. The goal is to have a blueprint. I hear this as a casual way, we tend to do cameras on the doorways. We tend to do cameras here. That would be kind of the layman's terms for this, but come up with a standard. We're going to get every single entrance exit to the building. If a laptop leaves in a backpack, I want to make sure every single door, we know that there's a way it left on a camera for investigative purposes, if you're not live monitoring. So the point I'm trying to make there is come up with philosophies. I've got clients that say, I never do water fountains. I always do water fountains. I've got clients that say, I only do the outside of fitness rooms. I never do the inside of the fitness rooms. People are conscious about what they look like on camera, and it's not appropriate to have it inside of a gym. I'm not giving you the winning answer, but what I'm trying to tell you is that whatever you do, and I'm just telling you from talking with public company risk departments, legal teams, all those kinds of things, do it consistently. Don't do it irregularly. If you're going to get a door, get every door. If you're going to get fitness gyms or you're going to do cafeterias, make sure you do it in a consistent way. Obviously, never point a camera in any way, shape, or form that can point towards or inside of a bathroom. It needs to always be on the wall of the door of the bathroom facing outward. Those are kind of things that are common sense to us, but I just wanted to make sure you guys thought about that. And then there's some things that are judgment calls. As much as I preach consistency, it's also important to think about history. You guys have the site knowledge of what happens at your properties, your maintenance staffs, your engineering staffs, whatever kind of staff you have that helps maintain your assets. They know. I always end up repairing that fence on the west side of the campus, or whatever that is. Maybe you have a bad neighbor. Maybe you have a little bit tricky neighborhood. Maybe your neighborhood's flipping over. Maybe it's in an urban market. There's a lot of dynamics that you all know about your properties, and hopefully you understand that any good partnership needs to take that tribal knowledge you have and leverage it into your design. Okay. Wiring we've covered, camera type we've covered, rooftops types of cameras. I don't want to get too specific because I don't know what your portfolios look like, but just you've already learned from me wire types, camera types, and even a little bit about positioning and height and that kind of thing. I'll just say that thinking through the purpose of each camera is important. And I'll say it this way: everybody wants to have a lot of cameras, and everybody has a budget that restricts them from getting as much as they want. So think about it. It's not doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, what your business is, or what your asset looks like. It's the same story I deal with a company that's spending a ton of money with me on cameras, or a company that wants to protect a baseball diamond with 2 cameras because they keep getting their electrical poles, copper stolen. By the way, just a quick point: copper is at an all-time high. Okay, that's literally all-time high. If anybody wants to go Google it after this, that is a problem for all of us. Okay, that's copper criminals all of a sudden start itching to steal that stuff. That becomes this is a very, very important time right now to just double check, maybe do one more walk around your campus, make sure you don't have any sort of exposed metal, plumbing, those kinds of things, even things that aren't copper that could be perceived as copper. I have clients that I see HVAC units on the ground. If you guys have HVAC units that are not on the roof but are on the ground, please think about that. If you need to cage them, cover them, bush them, just make it good spot for prickly bushes. These are the kinds of things where I'm trying to give you this advice just from doing this so long that hopefully I'm not getting much feedback, but hopefully from this group you think that that's something that could be a tip or trick that could help you guys. And when I say guys, I mean guys and gals, of course. Guard stations, I think we've covered that enough. Understand that the cost of your own person sitting there streaming in the cameras is what we see and is very traditional. It's also very expensive. For those of you that are trying to be conscious of your money, just think about your strategies. Having physical presence, walking around your sites is great, and in certain times of the year or times of the day or times of the week, based on what you've got going on your relative assets, it might be absolutely necessary. Other times it might not be. I work with a school in the DFW area where they used to park a police car there at night. That's a very expensive proposition, right? And our company watches it every night now, and they've saved I won't tell you, but very, very large dollars annually. And that's an opportunity to save money, especially when somebody can do it at a fraction of the cost that you can do it for. So. Okay, jumping forward to make this a little bit more fun, I wanted to show you guys, and I'm going to go back to full screen here somehow. I just don't know how this will exactly work because I may not be able to see you. Maybe I'll just show you a little bit of videos and I'll come back. Let's see here. I'm hopeful you can see my screen. There's a lot going on. So I'm going to skip to a couple.
We see it in your presenter's notes version.
Okay. So if I do this, you can see it normal now?
There we go. Now we
okay, thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it because it takes over both my screens, so I don't know this. So thank you for that help. So let me show you a nice candid example. And by the way, folks, this part of the presentation is supposed to be entertaining. So feel free to come off of mute if you want to laugh or make a comment. I love good energy, so please bring it to me if you've got it. I'm going to start with this kid in the corner climbing an HOA pool gate. So I don't know if anybody heard the audio there, actually, but that video was a little kid climbing a gate, in a pool area that's locked for the winter. That's clearly a high risk example of sounding a speaker and scaring them off. Here's a parking lot. This could be absolutely any one of your properties. Oh, sorry. Let's try that again. It's not full screen. I apologize. You can see an operator is driving a pan tilt zoom camera. Here you got some high school kids in one car, and another car pulls up. Maybe a bag of something is handed out of the car. Maybe a little celebratory beverage to say congratulations. And in this case, an average parking lot, we sound a speaker. And now you see these kids cram into their cars and drive away very, very quickly. Kind of your petty theft annoyances. You really want to use a strategy that helps folks understand that this is not the place to hang out. This is not the place to loiter. This is a little bit more serious incident. Let me see if I can get this to go full screen. This is not quite organized crime, but it's pretty legit in terms of how organized they are. Sorry, it's not going full screen here. Well, I'll do my best to help you see it a little bit better. You can see here, actually 5 people all climbing under a fence line. And it'll be tricky for you to see right now, but there's a guy carrying a gas-powered saw that he can use to cut through concrete, locks, doors. I mean, he can cut right through it, never mind cutting the lock off. And the 5th guy has a set of crowbars. Now, this is internal external theft, is what I call it. This is a property, happens to be in Northern California, that might have had been there for 6 months and monitored by us, but might be the week that they got product inside the building. And magically, within 3 days, having no hits in 6 months, within 3 days, they all of a sudden have 5 people dressed in black with serious tools coming to attack their property. And within a matter of 30 seconds or so, here you're going to see we sound a speaker on them, and then these guys are going to essentially take off running, sprinting in the next couple of seconds. Here you go. So they take off running. I apologize that it's so small, guys. It's obviously something I would like to show bigger. I'll go with 1 more or 2 more videos and we'll call it quits on the videos, but you can see we scared those guys off. If anybody's ever seen, this is a little bit of a graphic video, but it's not too bad, especially when if it's gonna be this small. If anybody's ever seen, there's a show out there about a chemistry teacher. This is kind of like that in real life. Oh, this one's going full screen. You will see a person completely on fire with, unfortunately, potentially this might be a chemical lab. So there's a person here, completely on fire, their clothes engulfed, maybe their shirt's burning off and all those kinds of things. So terrible situation, a lot going on, and just quite a crazy incident. So just kind of thought I would share a little bit of that. In terms of analytics and kind of moral integrity, which I think is an interesting topic, I'll just spend a minute on the topic of AI and machine learning and where analytics are going. This is me in my old house 10 years ago, but I want you to see this video because it's pretty interesting, and I will talk about the ethical lines. I apologize. Let me go back, see if I can play this. There we go. There you can see me, a much younger, skinnier version of me. I'll pause it for a sec because this is a quick video. Notice that all on just a sort of not very expensive web camera, and I'm moving, it's starting to predict things about me. And this is me just playing with something I found on the internet.
We can't see it.
David, your screen. FYI, I'm not able to see your screen.
Yes, share your screen.
Okay, let me see. Thank you for that heads up. Where is, oh, it just stopped sharing. Okay, let's try this again. Are you able to see my background?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that heads up. I apologize. Okay, are you able to see the video? Let me try doing it this way. Are you able to see me moving in this video?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll pause it there. Maybe this is an easier way for me to keep, I apologize for the technical difficulties here. Notice that this basic algorithm, or fairly advanced algorithm to be honest, is detecting that I am a male. It's guessing my age. It's talking about my potential race, my emotional happiness, and the distance to the camera. Of course, we don't offer any of these services, but this is David playing with cameras. And I think that I've had the fortunate chance to speak in front of some of the most significant CIOs in real estate about a 1-hour presentation on the ethical lines of what video surveillance is or is not or should not be. And why I'm showing you this is because there are things coming out that I think, and everybody would think, professionally or personally, are starting to cross some lines. And I'm not trying to get into anybody's personal beliefs here, but there's starting to be some things that are capable of doing some pretty powerful things. As a vendor, as a company, and as a family-owned company who I believe does something good for the world and helping make security and save lives and do all kinds of cool things. I believe that there are some things that can be done, ethically, and there's some things that people might offer that cross the line. We don't offer this. We do offer something that just counts people entering into a building, but without any sort of identification whatsoever. That was the line that I chose as the leader of a 1,000-person company. That was a line I felt comfortable that I could tell my religious leader, my wife, my kids what we were doing, which was counting how many people walked into a grocery store, which actually changes the rental rates for the small tenants next to the anchored grocery store. So think about the dry cleaners or the small restaurant that you go down the street, near where you get your bread or whatever. This was an interesting application we did for a public company where the tracking of just the counts of the people, not who they are, provided very valuable evidence to them. And you can see this counter kind of working. I know you won't be able to read the numbers here, but it's counting regardless of who they are and what they look like. It's just saying that this many people came in at this hour of the day. And we used the technology to do that. We don't offer any of this kind of stuff, but I promise you there are lots of marketing and advertising companies that are going down the path of this. You can imagine, name that national telecom cell phone provider store that would love to put a single camera in their front door to see if you walk out with more of a smile versus you don't. Those kinds of questions come at me all the time, and we just decline offering those services. But I just wanted you guys to be aware. It's not something that I was trying to bring up to sort of get into a controversial conversation, but I just wanted to share that there are starting to be some ethical considerations to think about in this space that we're in. Okay, for the sake of time, we've got about 15 minutes left. I have no more official content, but I have a lot of topics that could be interesting. I've put up some topics. The first row is a little bit nerdier, but just kind of some of the behind the scenes facilities, technical wiring, that kind of stuff. We haven't spent a lot of time on these topics, so I probably will if somebody doesn't jump out at me right now with some good juicy questions in terms of the other sort of security solutions beyond video. AI and ML, if anybody wants a quick primer on those and or on the camera standards, I'm more than happy to jump into that if you guys want some knowledge on that. And if any of you just want to be entertained with some crazy stories, I'm more than happy to just share a couple crazy stories. So I'll take a quick pause there and just ask if anybody wants to show either turn off mute and ask me a question, which I would love. I'd absolutely love that question opportunity. Please do. If not, I will fill the air with some other interesting topics.
Thanks, David. If anybody has a question, please unmute yourself and go and ask, or drop it in the chat. And David, just FYI, we have about 5 to 10 minutes left. So I'm interested in hearing some crazy stories. I think that'd be a blast. But I'm also not a CFO or a facility director, so I don't want to take away from the education if other people have a particular topic up there they want to listen to. But I'd love to hear some crazy stories.
Okay. And like I said, if anybody wants to take anything offline, reach out to me afterwards. Happy to help out. I did get a message from somebody, so maybe I'll address that here in a second. So it looks like, sorry, I'm a little behind on this because I was PowerPointing. A lot of copper stolen from dozens of HVAC units. So this is actually how we started the company in 2007. Was kind of copper crime was big back then. I'm just telling you guys because the copper prices are going up. I'm predicting now that this will become a bigger and bigger problem for all of us. So Kevin, I think I've actually met you a couple times before, but Kevin, thanks for contributing that to the group. In terms of some crazy stories, since we just have, I guess, 3-4 minutes left, I was asked to fly to Washington, D.C. Precisely 2 months before the United States presidential election. I was asked to advise all of the immediate real estate directly around the U.S. White House. Very much a time in COVID where my family was not okay with me hopping on an airplane, but did a little bit of my duty to provide service to our country and help with a little bit of the planning on the commercial real estate around the government buildings, not necessarily for the government. We don't necessarily work with any federal agencies, but that was an interesting project and even an interesting phone call, to say the least. In terms of elevators, an interesting city story. The city of Denver called me. This was maybe 8 years ago. This was a councilman in the city of Denver and said, "We have so many problems with our elevators. Can you just come to Denver and help look at one specific city bridge?" And I'm talking a pedestrian bridge. This is over the famous railroad tracks, kind of near 16th Street Mall, if anybody knows Denver. And they showed us an elevator on either side of two pedestrian bridges. They were getting $400,000 a year of peeing, pooping, spray painting, and scratching on these 4 elevators. That's $100,000 of expense per year per elevator on just damage. We basically had added about 8 cameras. I mean, you're talking, maybe a $15,000 to $20,000 scope, and we stopped 98% of it within the first 30 days by just watching the cameras and sounding speakers on people that are sitting there in the elevators doing things they shouldn't. And then last, it sounds like this is a fairly national group. I happen to be in Dallas, Texas. Maybe there's some local here and some that are not in Dallas. But I'll just tell you something that I'm seeing directly in Dallas that probably none of you know about, that I'm also seeing nationwide. That is absolutely the most interesting thing I've seen in modern era with organized crime. Illegally stolen cars are showing up in parking garages of my clients, sitting there while they're trying to find a buyer on the black market, on the underground market, and then leaving when they're sold. So I'll show up at an apartment complex in Uptown for those that are in Dallas, and I do lots of them down there, and I'll see $100,000, you name that brand, really fancy sedan with nice wheels and all that jazz, fancier cars than I own. And I'll see 4 weeks worth of dust sitting on the top of the car, and it hasn't moved. And the first thing I'll say to my customer is, 1, I'm pretty sure you have an illegal car ring going in your garage. They're just using your garage for a temporary holding space. 2, what kind of procedures do you have? Do you mark with chalk? Do you have a sticker you put on if you don't move your car, if it's not registered? And I try to work with my customers to say, never mind with self-offers. You've got a problem that's a little bit more legit than you may realize. Let's work with some investigation, some detectives in Dallas PD in this case, or whatever the PD is of association. And I'm seeing that very, very aggressively now. And I'm actually coaching and sharing this with police enforcement all around the country of what I'm seeing and even identifying it with them to proactively help prevent this issue, which is actually quite rampant. So, guys, I think I'm asked to end my time here. So my name is David Charney. Helped found South Monitoring. I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me privately. But I do appreciate your time. Hopefully this was educational and you guys and gals found it beneficial.
Thanks, David. This has been great. Will you move to the next slide so your contact information shows up?
Absolutely. Thank you for a lot of PowerPoint guidance today, William. Here's my contact information. And please feel free to jot it down. I'm happy to give any advice I can. I help out lots of organizations. And I'm sure William will provide it if you didn't capture it from here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And thanks everybody for attending this session. Again, this will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel for your viewing enjoyment. This will conclude the day 2, session 2, and in just a few minutes we'll have our closing ceremony, and I hope to see everybody over there. Thanks for everyone attending, and hope to see you in just a few minutes. Thanks again, David.